Okay, here we go. So any quick questions before we jump right in?
Not it.
All right, so Joseph has now taken all the silver of all the people of Egypt and stored it up for Pharaoh, taken all the livestock and transferred title. Not quite sure that he actually moved all the livestock into Pharaoh's pens and land, but certainly has possession of it, and now has bought up the service of all the people and ownership, the title to the land of all the people. Clearly has not moved the land, but the title now has gone over to Pharaoh. Rak, but not except Rak admat hakohanim lo kana ki chok lakohanim me'et paro va'achlu et chukam asher natan lahem paro al kain lo machru et admatam. Big chunk of information. Rak admat hakohanim. Only the land or the ground of the Kohanim. So we have Kohanim now here as a term used for Pharaoh's religious officials. They were not in previous stories. We had his magicians, his wise men, but now we learn that there was a Kohen, some kind of priestly system in Egypt, and their land is not taken. Lo kana. He did not purchase, he did not barter. So Joseph did not in any way take ownership of the priestly lands, ki chok lakohanim, because it was a law, a rule for the Kohanim, to the Kohanim, me'et paro, directly from Pharaoh. So me'et, literally from, and then eight, the direct object. So me'et is me'et paro. This is a rule from Pharaoh. So Joseph cannot countermand Pharaoh's rules. And Pharaoh apparently had a rule that the priestly lands, all of the priestly possessions, were part of the priestly supply under any circumstance. So that was not purchased. Va'achlu et chukam, and they ate their chuk. So they ate, here would probably be best translated as portion, but they're ruled, their legal possession.
What?
So they got to eat what they owned. They never had to give up their ownership to whatever they had. The question, of course, that one might ask is, where did that come from during this drought and famine? Everybody else was selling off the possessions to get food. Somehow the priests still have food.
Will you go back for a minute?
Sure.
What does kana mean? You said buy
Purchased.
or barter, but what's the form?
Oh, kana is the past tense, third
Simple
person
past.
singular.
What is hak a rule?
Chok, well, we have chukim and mishpatim, rules and judgments. We have that all the way through the Torah. Later, when God tells Israel what they have to do, Chok, the rabbis try to figure out what are the different legal terms in the Torah. They indicate which one is case law, which one is this kind of law, which one is that kind of law. The rabbis then try to determine what a chok was. But a chok is some kind of rule or statute or ordinance. It's a legal mandate. So it was a rule for the Kohanim from Pharaoh that their land was not to be confiscated or touched or taken from their possession. What we don't know is how did they have food in their land? How did they have possession of food at this point when nobody else does? One way of rationalizing that, perhaps, or explaining, was that during the 7 years of plenty, when Joseph was gathering up from everybody portions, he would have taken the Kohanim portions and put them into a Kohanim storage bin.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
The biblical author didn't care, because the biblical author is explaining to us how, as we will get to at the very end of this week, down at the bottom here, we'll get to the fact that this is the way it always is. And this is simply the biblical author's explanation for the Egyptian feudal system, which included priest land not owned by Pharaoh, but deeded to the priests in perpetuity. But one could certainly say that Joseph, knowing that rule from the very beginning, would have sequestered the priestly food so that it would be available to give back to them at no charge. If we use that explanation, of course, then we know, or we have more of a sense that this is Joseph's plan from the very beginning, to
So
create this system.
These priests have nothing to do with the Israelis.
No, these are Egyptian priests.
Okay.
These are Egyptian Kohanim.
Separation of church and state.
The Kohanim of the Hebrews, of the Bnei Yisrael, don't even come into being until Aaron gets that opportunity to be elevated into that position. So right now, and there are no Levites. There are Levites, but they're simply a clan of the Israelites. They're not in any special relationship other than Moshe, other than Moses, which will come later. Right now, the only thing we know about Levites is they're in the mix of all of the brothers. And Joseph is the one in charge. And we don't know what his relationship to his brothers out in Goshen is at this point. We only know that Joseph is somehow creating a system in Egypt about food ownership and food distribution. And in that system, the Kohanim of Egypt, the Egyptian priestly class, their land is, as one might say, sacrosanct. And this comes from Pharaoh directly. So va'achlu et chukam, they ate their legal portion, would be a way of translating that chok. They ate what was legally theirs. They ate according to their rule. Asher natan lahem paro, that gave to them Pharaoh. So Pharaoh gave to them their portion, and they're eating from their portion. Al-Kain, therefore, Al-Kain lo machru et admatam, therefore they did not sell. Machru is the selling, kana is the buying, machru is the selling. They did not sell their land. What we don't actually hear about is whether they had any silver and whether they exchanged their silver initially. But if the priests of Egypt at that time were to live on a parsonage allowance, then maybe they were priests who took vows of poverty and didn't have any silver. They worked their land and they ate from their land. But all we know here is they did not sell their land, and we don't get the statement, but the assumption would be that they didn't sell themselves. However, perhaps they didn't sell themselves because they already didn't own themselves because they were Pharaoh's Kohanim. They were already servants, and Kohen actually means more servant than it does priest. It's a holy servant. So they're already holy servants, so they can't sell themselves into servitude because they're already there. And the only thing they own is their land, and they can't relinquish their title to their land. So all of that in verse 22
So,
with commentary.
you're saying that the word servant is within the word hakohanim?
Yes, Kohen actually means a holy servant.
But how do you get that from those
Because
letters?
that's what the Hebrew word kahen means.
Oh, I see.
A priest is a holy servant. In English, we think priest and servant are two different words.
Mm.
In Hebrew, Eved and Kohen are two different forms of servitude. One is secular servitude, that's an Eved. The other is holy servitude, that's a Kohen.
Mm.
And we actually see that concept in Jewish law with the firstborn male who has to be bought back from service. And you cannot do pidyon haben, redemption of the firstborn, for one who is the child of a Kohen, because you can't buy them back from servitude in which they are already mandated.
Today is that buyback day in the Christian church.
Really.
And that's
Yeah.
where its roots come from.
It's called the presentation, but it's the presenting the firstborn male in the temple.
Yep, give them so that they don't have to become a priest.
Why is it today, Catherine?
Because it's 40 days after Christmas, and that's what it says in the Bible.
Not 7 days.
No.
Pidyon haben in the Bible, in the Torah, as far as the firstborn, is actually on 30 days.
Huh. So why is it bris after 7 days?
Because
The
that's when the
bris,
clotting factor comes in.
everybody gets brist. Well, every male gets brist, whether they're Kohen or not, at 8 days.
8 days.
But the child, the firstborn child, born through the birth canal, who is a male of Israel, according to later text in the Torah, belongs to God. And God says, if you want him back, you're going to have to buy him back. But a Kohen belongs to God, whether he likes it or not, and therefore you can't buy him back.
And what makes him a Kohen at birth?
His father is a Kohen. Ultimately, they are descendants of Aaron.
That's what I was always told too.
Yes. If your father was a Kohen, you're a Kohen. He's a Kohen because his father was a Kohen, and theoretically, they are each Kohens because their direct ancestor from among the tribal entities was Aaron.
Uh-huh.
So the priests, again, think holy servant. So the holy servants of Pharaoh have been given their land as their perhaps only mundane possession, their only worldly, earthly possession. So their land can't be bought and sold. So Joseph didn't buy it, and lo kana, and they didn't sell it, lo machru. 23. Vayomer Yosef el ha'am, hen kaniti etchem hayom, ve'et admatchem lefar'o, he lachem zera, uzratem et ha'adama. So now Joseph makes a proclamation. Vayomer Yosef el ha'am. Literally, Joseph said to the people. He broadcast it on Fox, CNN, and MSNBC all at the same time. as well as putting it out on everybody's social media. So said to the people would be more a matter of he made a proclamation.
Is that the standard word for people?
Yes, Am is a people. Am is a collective. Hen kaniti etchem. Behold, I have bought you. Kaniti is past tense, first person, singular. And the root you can see is still kana. So kaniti, I have bought you, etchem, all yuns, you alls. And chem there is the second person, plural, masculine, which is the inclusive of everybody. Hayom, today, literally hayom, the day, means today. So hen kaniti etchem hayom, behold, I have bought all of you today. It would be more a matter of not literally today necessarily as now, from this day forward. As of this day, the proclamation said, I own you. I bought you all. Ve'et admatchem, and again, adama, ground, the arable land, the chem, you all, plural. So right now, as of today, I have bought you and I bought your land. War 24. V'haya bat vuot
Hello?
tatem chamishit lefaro va'arba hayodot yihye lachem lezera hasadeh ula'och lachem v'la'asher bevatechem v'le'echol letapchem.
You skipped the end of the previous sentence.
Yeah, you didn't finish
Oh, right,
23.
yes, I've
Lands.
pulled down, like,
No, sorry.
After
Hey
the,
lachem zera uzratem et ha'adama. So now hey lachem. All right, you all. So hey is sort of an interrogative. It's a look at this, you all. Another like hein. It's a behold, here. Hey lachem, now for you. Zera is seed. So I've given you food. I own your land. I own you. Here is planting seed. Here is seed. Uzratem et adama. You will now seed your land. Again, we don't know where we are in the drought famine. Second year, third year, fourth year, seventh year, fifth year, because we don't know where this process began within the famine time. We're told only that he bought silver in the first year, and he bought them in the second year. But it's the first year of their needing food after they ran out of their own stores, perhaps. So we don't know where we are. But now they're given seed in order to restart the agricultural cycle. Here is seed. Now go plant your seed, seed your ground.
So the Ha'am refers to all the Egyptians, not the Israelis?
Right. This is all Ha'am is all. This is all in relationship between Yosef and the Egyptians,
And how do we know that?
because that's who he's talking to.
Oh.
It's all of earlier. It said all of Egypt came to him, and he dealt with all of Egypt.
I mean on last times.
Yeah. Nowhere have we yet had any relationship. Last thing we knew, his brothers were settled and father were settled in the land of Goshen. Meanwhile, back in the palace, so this is all now Joseph and Egypt. His brothers and father have been settled out in Goshen, and now he can get back to his real work, which is feeding the Egyptians and buying up, gaining possession of everything in Egypt. So 24 now. So he's given them seed to plant for the future. V'haya batvuot unatatem chamishit lafaro va'arba hayadot yihye lachem lezera hasadeh uleoch lechem v'laasher bevatechem v'leechol letapchem. So now you're going to plant your seed and you're going to be able to harvest it. You're going to have harvest from your seed. And again, if you want to try to figure out what it will be talking about, you can look over here and it say, it will be in the harvests. So that matches up specifically with v'haya bat tevuot. And that's where learning the prefixes helps, because the ba is the in the. So now you know some verb in the something, and that took you to the translation where it said, it will be in the harvests. So v'haya, and it will be. So here's the seed. Plant the seed, and it will be that the seed will then sprout. And in your harvesting, in the harvest, batvuot, unatatem, and you will give. Natan is give, tem is the second person plural. Unatatem, and you will give chamishit. And we have on the sheet chamesh, which is 5. Chamishit is a 5th. So it comes from the root chamesh, 5, but chamishit makes it the fraction, 1/5. Revi'it would be a 4th. Shlishit, 1/3. So you can actually take the numbers and recognize the fractions by having them be 1/, the reciprocal. Chamishit reciprocalizes in Hebrew. So you will take you will give 1/5 the Pharaoh. So when you do your harvest, 1/5 of it goes to Pharaoh. And perhaps as a guard against future droughts and famines, from now on, even when you don't have the prediction of when will be the droughts, we're going to plan ahead. So you will be 20% of your income will go into your Pharaoh run retirement plan. So we're paying everybody's paying 20% into Social Security.
But Rabbi Sam, I do have a question that kind of popped into my head when I was reading the English. And that is, I mean, would this have been considered for the time overly generous? Could it not have been the other way around?
Well, we don't know. At this point, we're not being told how it compares or anything like that. And comparative world culture of the time could go to Ugaritic texts and Mesopotamian texts and other kinds of places to see what kind of taxation was practiced then. What is most likely from the standpoint of the biblical author is that was the practice in Egypt at the time of the biblical author, who then places the origin of that practice with Joseph.
See, okay.
So
it felt like it was.
Author isn't concerned with was that excessive or very generous taxation, but it was the fact, and we're explaining the fact.
Okay.
But yes, comparative world cultures, and because Egypt was not the only feudal system in the ancient Near East. What portion of their workers possessions did they take for themselves? Might be an interesting study.
I guess maybe I was overthinking or just
Yeah.
not being
So
able
it's
to really
just-
think about it the right way, but I
Yeah.
thought, is this some kind of commentary on the Jewish thinking with respect to, what one should have to give up in servitude?
That's an interest. Yeah, I mean, later we're going to be told that we have to tithe.
So this is doubly generous.
Exactly. So, or doubling burdensome. We only have to give 10%. The Egyptians had to give 20%. So it could be, but I think it's more likely that this was our 10%, therefore a response to 20% was too much.
Thank you.
Rabbi
So-
Sam, is the word tavuot related to Shavuot?
No,
Okay.
Is related to
What does
both.
Shavuot mean?
no, it's tevuah is the harvest.
Is it related to the?
Well, it could be from bow, that which comes from the land. So perhaps the bow in the middle does give it some connection to the word coming. Tevuot is the thing that comes out of the land, so it's the harvest.
But what does Shavuot mean?
Shavuot comes from the word shavua, which means a week.
Oh,
Also means an oath.
okay.
And
Okay.
Shavuot is a week of weeks.
Mm.
So the harvest, then, they have to give 1/5 of it to Pharaoh. Va'arba hayadot yihiyeh lachem. And 4 parts. Yadot may come from yad, hand. Yada is is simply a portion. So if you're giving up 1/5 of your harvest, then 4 portions, 4 parts of it, then are remaining. So 4 parts, Yihiyeh Lachem, will be to you. You get to own. You have 4 parts.
So,
Pharaoh gets 1 part.
So Arba is 4.
Arba is 4. If you give up 1/5, you have 4 parts left.
Do I want to know why the vowels are different in those 2 forms of it will be? Probably not.
Vihaya is and it was.
No,
Which
and
is-
the first word of 24 and the word we're at now.
Right. Vihaya, the first word,
Yeah.
haya is was, and
Oh.
yihiyeh is will be.
Okay, so that's was, okay.
So that's, yeah. And the
Okay.
vihaya gives us that very strange construction of the future perfect. Yiheh is a straightforward imperfect.
But, so isn't it, and it will have been? Is that
Yeah,
what-
it will be that it was. It will have been. Or the continuous into the future. But Yihiyeh Lachem will be to you. That construction in Hebrew, Yeshli, Ainli, Hayali, all of those are literally I have, you have, we have, they had. So Yihiyeh Lachem literally is you will have. So you get to keep. You give Pharaoh 20%, you will have 4 parts left. You'll have 80%. Lezera hasadeh, to the seed of the field. Ula och lechem, and le, to ochel, food, chem, you plural. So the seed of the field, the 4 parts of the seed of the field, you get to as food. You get to eat it. And it's for you, v'la asher bevatechem, and to that you're in your houses. So it feeds you and your household, v'le'echol l'tapchem, and to eat for your tops. And remember, the top was the babes, but it was a way of saying everybody in the family, all the way down to the infants.
The tough friend.
So the 4 parts of your produce, you get to keep. You eat it, your household eats it, your family eats it. It's all for you. 25. Vayomru hecheyitanu nimsachen be'enei Adoni v'hayinu avadim lefaro. And this is the people's response. Vayomru, they said. This is not the they of conspiracy theories. This is a specific, we know who the they are. They are all of the Egyptians. And again, we know that this is now the Egyptians still talking, because those are the only ones that Joseph has been dealing with in all of this food barter system during the famine, during the drought. And how do they respond? They say, Heche yitanu. You have kept us alive. Chai is the root in the middle, live. Hecheya is the causative form of the verb, anu, us. We know of that in a different form in shehecheyanu.
Mm.
That has kept us alive. But shehecheyanu is he kept us alive. Hecheyitanu, you kept us alive.
Mm.
The ta there makes it a you. So you kept us alive. You caused us to live. Nimsa chen be'enei Adoni. Limso chen means to find favor with. And we get that all the time in the Torah. Anytime anybody asks for a favor, they say, Im matzati chen be'einecha. If I have found favor in your eyes. Chen is favor or pleasingness. Matzah is found. Nimsa, we found. Nimsa chen, we found favor. Be'enei Adoni, in the eyes of my master. And once again, Joseph is referred to as Adoni, even though it's Nimsa, we, Hecheyetanu, we. It's not Adonenu, our master, but my master. So again, we can read it as each of them individually affirms Adoni, or Adoni is in fact a title that Yosef has. So you don't have to worry about the possessive pronoun being singular, plural, because we could say, we have found favor in the eyes of Adoni. And then it's not translated. It's not my master, but it's the title Yosef has over the people. But they're saying 20% taxes, way, ha, that's so nice of you. Because you kept us alive, and we have found favor in your eyes to keep us alive. So 20%, and we get to keep 80%. Good deal.
Except they don't own their land anymore.
Well, and then they will say, V'hayinu avadim, and we will be avadim. We will be workers, servants, slaves. All of those are possible translations of the word avadim. Lefaro, for Pharaoh. We now voluntarily state that we are Pharaoh's workers.
Do we know, sort of just from history, was there a difference between servants and slaves? Was slaves or servants paid? Were they owned? Do we know anything about that?
Well, in the language, there doesn't seem to be any distinction. in practice, yes, there were different distinctions, whether it was a local or a foreign servant.
So
Whether, and later we'll get rules about indentured servants.
But if there's only one word, it suggests that the meaning has to be explained somehow, or it could be any of those.
Right, and in fact, we do have in texts like the Hammurabi Code, we do have different rules for different kinds of servants. But certainly a servant was one who was paid, always. They were paid in food and lodging. A household servant had free room and board and free food.
But wouldn't you assume a slave was also paid in food?
Exactly. Exactly. A slave was also paid. The difference might be whether or not they had an opportunity to have a side hustle or eventually go free. Here, for example, we're being told every pharaoh owns all the land. So rather than seeing it as a 20% tax of all the produce which belonged to Pharaoh, 80% wages of the produce went to the avadim, to the people.
Which in times of famine would be a lot of pay.
Exactly. Because you would get from the Pharaoh storehouse from the 20% you had been given up. I mean, imagine if every worker in a factory received 80% of their share of the income they produced for the factory.
Wouldn't suit capitalism.
But
Right.
it would certainly create a lot less poverty.
Yeah, but the fact
Yeah,
is
the Workers' Party would be bigger.
Yeah, you work for an institution, you get a number of shares in the institution that pay you an 80% dividend on all income. And the CEO owns everything. By the way, we don't get any statement here as to Pharaoh's pay. If Pharaoh's pay is 20% of everybody else's income or production. So Pharaoh still gets a lot. But everybody gets 80% of their share of the production. So that's another way to read this whole text.
Right.
And the people apparently are reading it that way. Good deal. Instead of 100% of nothing in famine times, we get 80% of the normal produce.
Have these passages ever been used by anti-Semites?
Oh, everything's been used by
Everything.
anti-Semites.
At this specific?
Not to my knowledge in direct, but it would not be surprising if something along these lines, or look what Israel did to Egypt back then.
Save them from
Certainly,
starvation could be one point of view.
yeah. So but that would be a way of reading the verse 25 in Vayomru hechitem nimsachen be'enei Adoni. You have kept us alive and we have found favor in your eyes. And that's why we buy into this particular economic system. We are the avadim for Pharaoh, and we get paid 80% of our share of the production. 26. Vayasem ota Yosef lachok ad hayom hazeh al admat Mitzrayim lefaro lachomesh rak admat hakohanim levadam lo haita lefaro. So now we get within verse 26 our indication that this is being written at a later date. Vayasem ota, and he put it. The it would be this whole rule system, the law. Vayasem, and so he established it, that the he is Yosef, l'chok ad hayom hazeh, for a rule up to this day. So that would be even to this day of the biblical author, the storyteller, the narrator of this history. Even to this day, this is the law of Egypt. Again, indication that this is dealing only with Egypt. This is not the law of the Israelites, or necessarily even the law of foreigners in Egypt. This is the Egyptian law. And we are, as I've stated, al admat Mitzrayim, on the land or the ground or the agricultural process of Egypt.
Which is hazeh?
Hazeh, hayom hazeh, literally the day, the this.
Is it always this and not that?
Well, if we were talking about someplace else, they're talking about hayom hahu would be that day, and it would refer to a specific day. Hayom hazeh, this day. Same thing in English. That day and this day are not the same things. Hayom hahu would be that day. Hayom hazeh, this day. So even up to now, this day, this is the chok, this is the law, al adamat Mitzrayim, upon the land of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, upon the agricultural system of Egypt. And this is the law, lefaro lachomesh. To Pharaoh, there is five, a fifth, chomesh, a fiveness. Rak admat hakohanim, again, as we started up at the top, only the land, the ground of the Kohanim, Levadam, alone, Levadam, alone to them. This is singled out as the Kohanim land. Lo hayta leFaro, was not for Pharaoh. Lo hayta, was not, leFaro, to Pharaoh. Pharaoh did not have possession, ownership of the priestly land, the priestly harvesting area. Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim be'eretz Goshen. Meanwhile, on the other side of the delta, and Israel dwelled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen. So verse 27, part A, is while this was all going on in Egypt, Israel, which was actually settled in Egypt, was settled specifically in Goshen. What that has to do with anything, you're going to have to wait till we get back to more red story. Meanwhile, the last thing we knew in the blue story was Joseph settled his brothers and his father in the land of Goshen. All of this red stuff is not in the blue story. He settled them in, they settled in. No story about what happened during the famine, who ate what. No story about the Egyptian system, economic system, which again makes sense because remember, the red story are the people who live in the southern area of Israel, are adjacent to Egypt. Their nearest neighbors are the Egyptians. The northern kingdom, their neighbors are the Assyrians, the Persians, the Mesopotamians. So they're really not anywhere vested in knowing anything about the Egyptian economic system. All we need to know in the blue story is Vayeachazu va vayifru vayirbu ma'od. So they took possession of, that is Goshen. So they now own Goshen. They are in possession of Goshen, which puts them outside of Egypt. And Vayifru, and they were fruitful, Vayirbu ma'od, and they really multiplied. They multiplied very muchness. So all we know in the blue story is they're settled in the land of Goshen. They're separated from the Egyptian system because they now have as their possession Goshen. And while they're there, they multiply like Jews in Egypt. Some people would say like rabbits.
What are the first three blue words?
Vaye'echazu va, and they took possession of it. Or they had it as a possession in it. Ba, in, it, or her. That is the land, Goshen. And Vayifru comes from peri, fruit. They were fruitful. Vayirbu comes from Rav, much, many. So they multiplied. And they didn't just multiply, they Vayirbu ma'od. They very multiplied. They really multiplied.
What is Vayishru? Oh, that's no.
Where are you?
Vayifru, the last word on the second to last line.
Vayeshev?
Vayifru.
Oh, Vayifru? The third blue word.
Yes.
Vayifru comes from peri, fruit.
Oh, that's fruitful.
Yes.
Oh, so it said, what is the difference between that word, Vayirbu?
Yirbu comes from many or much.
Oh, okay.
They were fruitful and they multiplied. So they were fertile and they had lots of kids. Fertileness doesn't necessarily imply many children.
Correct.
And many children doesn't imply necessarily that everybody was fertile.
Mm,
So how do you know children?
Well, that's what happens when you're fertile and you multiply.
Oh, I see. It doesn't say children or babes or anything.
No, it says they were fertile and they multiplied. They were fruitful and they multiplied.
Rapids.
Which is what, remember, God says to all of the creation, be fruitful and multiply. Peru uravu. Which is an implicit way of saying have children. When parents in a traditional Jewish service walk their children down the aisle, the parents of the groom walking next to the groom, the parents of the bride walk next to the bride, there is a tradition that they each carry a candle, which might have made sense practically since that was how you could see where you were going down the aisle when you did your weddings at night. But the commentary is the Hebrew word for candle, ner, plural nerot, is the gematria equivalent of peru uravu, be fruitful and multiply.
Mhm.
And so the implication of parents walking their children down the aisle carrying candles is we want lots of grandchildren.
It's a
But no,
little
the word
more
children is
subtle
not there.
than saying it all the time, but not much.
Yeah, children is not in there. Just they were fruitful and they really multiplied.
So I have two questions.
Only,
We have two words for land. Adamah and Eretz. What's the difference?
So Eretz is the generic land of Egypt. Adamah is the agricultural land of Egypt.
Ah,
So the land of Egypt includes desert and river. The Adamah just includes the fertile soil.
And we have two words for fifth, chomesh and
Yeah,
chamishah.
chamishit is literally a fifth.
Ti-
Chomesh is a fiveness.
Okay.
In fact, we talk about the Torah as being kumshei chamesh kumshei chameshim, the 5/5 of the 5 books, of the fives. So Pharaoh gets a fiveness, which would be a fifth of each and every one, but each one gives up a fifth. Pharaoh gets the fivenesses.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't have necessarily English corresponding words.
And Adama is an agricultural thing.
So yes, Adama is, well, clay or soil. Yes, you could read Adama as soil. Adam was created out of the Adama. The human figurine was carved, was done from clay. And then God breathed into its nostrils the breath of life. So Adama generally refers to the soil, an agricultural statement, as Eretz is generally a political statement. All right, next week.
Could you read,
Blue sto-
can you read slowly enough so that we can hear how the groups of words go together?
Sure.
Thank you.
And notice, by the way, if you can see it in the text, your printer may or may not capture it. Verse 28 at the top is
in bold.
bold,
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that.
and that's because the blue story is actually an amalgam of 2 other separate stories, a older E and a newer EP, or a priestly additional creation to the older mythology. So 28 and 48:1 actually tell the same story, and most modern critics say that they tell the same story because we have an older strain and then an added newer strain. And then the editor-redactor took a continuation of the previous red story and stuck it in between so that you wouldn't notice you had a duplicate story. But we'll examine that next week. So verse 28. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim, Shva Esrei Shana, Vayehi Yemei Yaakov, Shnei Chayav, Sheva Shanim, Va'arba'im Uma'at Shana. 29. Vayikrevu Yemei Yisrael Lamut, Vayikra Livno Liosef, Vayomer Lo, Imna Matzati Chen Be'enecha, there's that phrase again of finding favor in the eyes. Simna Yadcha Tachat Yerechi, Va'asita Imadi Chesed Ve'emet, Alna Tik Bereni B'Mitzrayim. 30. V'shachavti im avotai, unasatani mimitzrayim, ukvartani bikvuratam, vayomer anochi e'eseh chidvarecha. 31. Vayomer Hish of and there's that word Shavua as an oath. Hish of Ali, Vayishva lo, Vayishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita. And now into chapter 48. 3 chapters left in the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. Vayehi acharei hadvarim ha'ele, vayomer liyosef, hine avicha chole, vayikach et shnei vanav imo, et Menashe ve'et Ephraim, vayaged liyaakov, vayomer hine bincha Yosef ba elecha, vayitchazek Yisrael, vayeshev al hamita. And again, we'll point out some differences between Yisrael in the red, Yaakov in the blue. The order of what's happening seems to be a little strange. And the answer for that, of course, is because it is. The order within the red is not strange. The order within the blue is not strange, but the order between the red and the blue is very strange. So we're coming to the end. Yaakov is about to be no more. But he spends 2 more chapters becoming no more. He's dying. He's almost dead, but he's got room enough in his time to give a whole chapter of blessings to each one of his sons, which are not necessarily the nicest things to say to your sons. But we'll get there.
It's a shorter dying than it took Madame Butterfly.
Yes, if you want a wonderful view of opera, go check out Spike Jones' Night at the Opera.
Love
Or-
Spike Jones. Hello, everybody, by the way.
Good to hear good news from you,
Hi.
Carrie.
Yeah, good to hear good news.
Yes. Good to
Yeah,
feel good
so-
news.
Spike Jones had some great stuff. And one of my favorites is the Hicks going to the opera. And yes, there's a whole verse about dying in the opera,
What
as
was
seen
the,
by one who is not used to opera.
It's
what was
very
the
funny.
news I missed from the beginning, I guess?